Have you ever wondered why the real millionaires, the ones who quietly shape industries, build empires, and move nations, almost never show up on your social media feed? You won't find them flashing cars, posting champagne selfies, or talking about mindset. They've disappeared, not because they lost everything, but because they found something far more valuable. Picture this: a crowded restaurant, everyone trying to be seen. The loudest voices, the most expensive clothes, the constant performance of success. Yet in the corner there's a man in a plain shirt, speaking softly, observing more than he speaks. He owns the building they're in. No one knows his name, and he prefers it that way. We live in a culture obsessed with visibility. We confuse attention with importance and exposure with power. But the truth, the uncomfortable one, is that real power grows in silence. It's not displayed, it's preserved. The richest people aren't hiding out of fear. They're disappearing out of intelligence because visibility has a cost. Every time you reveal your moves, you give away your advantage. Every time you seek validation, you hand your control to others. The truly rich understand something most people never learn. The moment you crave to be seen, you stop being free. And that's where the paradox begins. We chase wealth thinking it will make us visible, when in reality, visibility drains the very energy that builds true wealth: focus, patience, and strategic detachment. The richest individuals disappear not because they want to escape the world, but because they've outgrown the need for its applause. In the coming minutes, we're going to explore what thinkers like Machiavelli already knew centuries ago: that real influence is born in invisibility, not spectacle. You'll see why silence is the most expensive form of luxury, and why the ones who vanish often end up owning the world the rest are trying to impress. If this already challenges the way you think about wealth, hit like, and tell me in the comments, do you want to be seen as rich, or do you want to become unshakably free? What if you didn't have to prove anything to anyone? Not your success, not your intelligence, not even your worth. Imagine for a moment that your power didn't depend on being noticed, but on being effective. How would your choices change? How would your energy shift if your focus moved from being admired to being unstoppable? Close your eyes and picture this. You wake up tomorrow, and the need to impress vanishes. You don't check your phone for validation. You don't measure your progress by someone else's applause. Instead, your actions speak for you, quietly, but undeniably. That peace you feel in that vision, that's the atmosphere real wealth lives in. Most people spend their lives performing. Every decision becomes a show. What to wear, what to post, what to say, all guided by how it will look to others. But performance is exhausting, and it's also fragile. The moment your audience disappears, so does your identity. That's why the truly powerful build a life that doesn't depend on being seen. Their satisfaction comes from mastery, not admiration. Now imagine if you began living like that, not to impress, but to express your excellence through results. No announcement, no spectacle, just undeniable proof through quiet consistency. You'd notice something strange begin to happen. The more invisible you become, the more influence you actually gain. Because in a noisy world, silence stands out. This is what Machiavelli would call the art of hidden strength. The strategy of those who know that visibility often invites envy, manipulation, and distraction. To preserve their power, they choose withdrawal, not as escape, but as a form of dominance. They understand that mystery amplifies authority. The less people know about you, the less control they have over you. So, what if you stopped chasing exposure and started cultivating presence? What if your success became a quiet storm instead of a public performance? Ask yourself, are you building a life that can thrive in silence? Because when your value no longer depends on being seen, you finally begin to see what truly matters. We've been taught that success is something to be shown, that if no one sees it, it doesn't count. But what if that belief is exactly what keeps most people trapped? The idea that visibility equals value is one of the greatest illusions of our age. It's not wealth, it's dependency dressed as confidence. Think about it. Every influencer flaunting luxury is playing a game of attention, not power. Their value survives only as long as the spotlight stays on. Once the attention fades, so does the illusion of control. Real millionaires, the quiet ones, understood this long before social media was invented. They learned that attention is not power, it's exposure, and exposure always comes with a cost. Here's the hidden truth. When everyone can see your next move, you've already lost. Machiavelli warned about this centuries ago. The more predictable your power becomes, the easier it is to be destroyed. The visible lion gets hunted first. The invisible strategist lasts the longest. Our culture glorifies the spectacle of success but hides the solitude that sustains it. The men and women who quietly build legacies don't post their process. They live it. They operate like shadows, present, powerful, but unseen. Not because they're hiding, but because they understand something profound. What the public applauds today, it devours tomorrow. So maybe the real question isn't, how can I be seen? But why do I still need to be? Because behind that need often lives insecurity. The fear that if no one notices, we don't matter. And that's the trap the truly rich escape from. They no longer seek to appear valuable. They simply are. When you no longer need to display your power, you start to conserve it. You make moves in silence. You accumulate energy, wealth, and influence without noise. You stop performing and start becoming. That's the rupture, the shift that changes everything. The moment you realize that being unseen is not weakness but strategy. And maybe that's why the real millionaires vanish. Not because they've gone missing, but because they've finally arrived at freedom. Niccolo Machiavelli, often misunderstood as the cold architect of manipulation, actually revealed something far more subtle: the strategic art of invisibility. In The Prince, he warned rulers that too much exposure weakens authority. A wise leader, he said, knows when to appear and when to disappear. Power to Machiavelli wasn't in constant display but in careful concealment. He observed that those who parade their victories invite envy and resistance. Every show of success creates competitors. Every boast attracts enemies. The smart ones therefore move like shadows, unpredictable, silent, and patient. They reveal only what strengthens their position and conceal what could be used against them. That's not deceit, that's discipline. Now think of how that translates into our modern world. Today, visibility is currency. We post, we share, we overshare, believing that attention equals progress. But Machiavelli would say the opposite. Attention is a liability when not paired with control. To be constantly seen is to be constantly exposed to manipulation. The more people know your desires, your plans, your emotions, the easier it becomes for them to steer you. The real millionaires, the builders, not the performers, live by this principle. They operate below the noise, observing patterns others miss. They don't advertise their wealth because doing so would only make them targets for imitation, for resentment, for distraction. They preserve their autonomy by mastering discretion. That is Machiavelli's wisdom reborn in the 21st century. And here's the irony. The quiet ones are often misjudged as unremarkable, while the loudest appear powerful. But the quiet accumulate influence while the loud burn theirs for applause. Machiavelli would call this the economy of appearance. The understanding that not every truth deserves to be revealed, and not every victory must be announced. So when you see someone moving silently, don't mistake it for weakness. Silence, in the language of power, is precision. It's what separates the rulers from the performers. Ask yourself, in your own life, are you building for applause or for endurance? Because Machiavelli would tell you, those who last the longest are the ones the crowd forgot to notice. If you start to pay attention, you'll notice a strange pattern among those who truly succeed. At some point, they all begin to vanish. They stop posting, stop seeking attention, stop justifying their decisions. They turn inward, almost as if they've disappeared into a different frequency. But that's not retreat, it's refinement. You can sense this invisible shift when someone transitions from proving to building. They no longer need validation because their work itself becomes the proof. Their silence doesn't mean they've given up. It means they've entered the stage where words are unnecessary. In psychology, this is what Carl Jung might call individuation, the process of becoming whole, no longer dependent on the mirror of others. The opposite of this is what most people live. fragmentation, constantly scattering energy across platforms, opinions, and comparisons. It's not that they lack intelligence or potential, it's that their focus is constantly leaking through the cracks of visibility. Every time you perform, you lose a bit of your center. Every time you explain yourself, you surrender a piece of your mystery. The wealthy who disappear have mastered an ancient law of energy. Everything visible consumes. Every public move demands maintenance, the image, the impression, the narrative. And all that maintenance drains the very fuel that builds lasting power, focus. That's why they step away. They're not running from the world. They're escaping distraction. There's also a subtler layer here, the psychological piece of being unseen. When no one's watching, you can experiment without fear, fail without shame, grow without pressure. You reclaim the freedom to be authentic, not performative. And that authenticity, paradoxically, becomes the most magnetic force of all. So next time you notice someone fading from the public eye, don't assume decline. Look closer. You might be witnessing evolution, someone transitioning from noise to clarity, from exposure to mastery. And perhaps the real challenge for all of us is this: can you still create when no one's clapping? Can you still grow without being seen? Because those who can eventually own the stage the rest are still performing on. Visibility is vanity. Silence is strategy. Attention feeds the ego. Obscurity feeds the mind. You don't need to be seen to be significant. You need to be stable to be free. Every time you explain yourself, you spend power. Every time you withhold, you gain it. The loud seek validation. The quiet seek control. True wealth isn't about having more, it's about needing less. Not just in possessions, but in attention. Let this sink in. What you chase reveals what owns you. If you chase recognition, you belong to the crowd. If you chase mastery, you belong to yourself. Machiavelli would say, "Appear weak when you are strong, and strong when you are weak." But in our time, the truly wise appear invisible. And that's their greatest strength. Because the moment you stop broadcasting your life, you start living it. The moment you stop proving your worth, it multiplies. And the moment you stop demanding to be seen, the right people start noticing. There's a paradox hidden in all this. When you become silent, the world begins to listen. When you detach from attention, attention finds you. Not because you asked for it, but because you earned it through substance. So here's a truth few dare to admit. Most people don't really want freedom. They want admiration. But admiration is a cage lined with gold, beautiful, yet suffocating. The truly rich, the truly free, choose to disappear because they understand this. The only applause worth hearing is the sound of your own discipline echoing in silence. Write this somewhere, you'll see it every morning. Power doesn't shout, it whispers. And only those who quiet the noise inside themselves ever learn to hear it. Here's the strange truth. The more you withdraw, the more your presence expands. It sounds illogical, almost mystical, but it's the paradox that governs every form of real influence. What's scarce becomes valuable, and what's constant becomes ignored. Invisibility, then, isn't disappearance. It's refinement. Look at nature. The sun doesn't beg to be noticed. It rises. The ocean doesn't announce its depth. It simply pulls you in. Presence doesn't require performance. And yet we live as if existence itself depends on constant broadcasting. The louder we become, the less we're heard. Machiavelli understood this paradox long before social media existed. He observed that rulers who appeared too often among the people lost their mystique. Familiarity, he wrote, breeds contempt, or at least indifference. When a leader becomes ordinary, his influence fades. The same applies to modern power. The more accessible you are, the less authority you hold. True presence doesn't mean being seen everywhere. It means being felt even when you're not there. Think of those who left a mark on your life, a mentor, a writer, a leader, not because they flooded your attention, but because something about them lingered. That's the essence of real power. Subtle, enduring, and almost invisible. There's another layer to this paradox, one that psychology reinforces. Carl Jung said that the most powerful transformations happen in the unconscious, the unseen territory of the mind. The same is true for success. What grows in silence endures, because it's rooted in substance, not spectacle. The ones who master both presence and absence become unforgettable. They appear rarely, speak briefly, and act precisely. When they do, their words weigh more, because they're not diluted by constant exposure. The noise of others amplifies their silence. So the paradox stands. To be everywhere is to be nowhere. To disappear is to become undeniable. Ask yourself, in your career, your relationships, your goals, are you chasing visibility or building gravity? Because real gravity doesn't need to announce itself. It simply pulls everything toward it. And maybe that's the quiet secret the true millionaires understand, that the less they appear, the more the world revolves around them. When you stop living for attention, something extraordinary happens. You begin to experience peace, not the kind that comes from vacations or meditation apps, but the deep calm of not needing to prove anything anymore. That's the real reward the invisible millionaires find: inner sovereignty. The freedom to exist without the constant pressure of an audience. Think about how much energy is spent on maintaining an image. Every post, every update, every subtle comparison drains you of focus. When you walk away from that game, you don't lose relevance, you reclaim energy. And with that energy, you can finally build something lasting. Because what sustains wealth, influence, and wisdom isn't exposure, it's endurance. This is the emotional wealth that never gets discussed. The satisfaction of knowing that you no longer depend on anyone's perception to feel valuable, that you can be underestimated and still move mountains. The richest individuals understand this. The ultimate luxury is psychological freedom, the ability to disappear and still thrive. Imagine living without the need to announce your every move. You'd become unpredictable, harder to manipulate, more focused, more peaceful. Every decision would come from clarity, not reaction. That's not just success, that's mastery. You stop chasing validation and start cultivating substance. And with that shift comes an unexpected gift: authenticity. When no one's watching, you rediscover what truly drives you. Not trends, not approval, but truth. You return to what you actually love, not what earns applause. The invisible rich know that their real wealth is not in how much they own, but in how little they need to pretend. So what's the promise of stepping back from the spotlight? It's not obscurity, it's strength. It's influence that no one can cancel because it doesn't depend on exposure. It's the kind of quiet success that outlasts every algorithm, every hype cycle, every trend. You don't have to be rich to start living like that. You only have to shift your motive from wanting to be admired to wanting to be authentic. Because the moment you do, you stop performing and start becoming. And that perhaps is the wealth the world can't see, but can always feel. Behind this quiet way of living lies a structure. Not a mystery, but a method. The disappearance of the truly wealthy isn't random. It follows timeless principles that blend psychology, philosophy, and strategy. To understand it is to understand how real power sustains itself. First, the psychological foundation, self-sufficiency. In Jungian terms, it's the transition from the persona, the mask built to please society, to the self, the inner truth that no longer needs approval. Most people live trapped in the persona, performing for invisible judges. But those who reach genuine wealth dissolve that dependence. Their actions emerge from clarity, not craving. Second, the philosophical foundation, Stoicism. Think of Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire yet wrote, "Fame is emptiness." The Stoic principle of apatheia, freedom from emotional disturbance, aligns perfectly with the millionaire's silence. To stay calm amid chaos, to choose restraint over reaction, is to preserve your mental wealth while others waste theirs on noise. Third, the strategic foundation, Machiavelli's doctrine of controlled perception. The truly powerful reveal only what strengthens their position. This isn't deceit, it's precision. They understand that too much openness breeds vulnerability. Every silence, every absence is a calculated move to protect autonomy. When these three foundations merge, psychological wholeness, philosophical equanimity, and strategic restraint, a different kind of wealth appears: invisible influence. The power to move things without needing to be seen doing so. It's what allows quiet builders, thinkers, and creators to shape the world, while the crowd fights for attention. This framework isn't limited to money. It applies to every domain: leadership, art, relationships, even personal growth. The principle remains: mastery thrives in silence. Like roots beneath the soil, the unseen work sustains the visible bloom. The irony is that society rewards spectacle, but is built on the backs of those who resist it. Every enduring empire, company, or legacy was forged in private focus, not public display. Visibility may create fame, but invisibility creates foundations. So the question becomes, which are you building? An image or an empire? Because one fades with applause, and the other deepens with silence. At some point, every person chasing real freedom faces a choice: to keep performing or to quietly evolve. Those who choose evolution disappear, not from life but from illusion. They stop needing to be seen because they've already met themselves. That's the moment of true wealth, when your value no longer depends on visibility, and your peace no longer depends on praise. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He knew that power survives only when it withdraws. To last, it must protect itself from exposure, envy, and noise. The real millionaires follow the same law, not because they're hiding, but because they're guarding what's sacred: focus, time, and inner balance. Maybe that's what the disappearance really is. Not absence, but presence of a deeper kind. They haven't left the world. They've left the performance. While everyone else is broadcasting ambition, they're refining mastery. While others seek the stage, they're building the stage itself. And you? Where are you placing your energy? In the image or in the essence? Because the truth is, attention fades, but discipline compounds. What you build in silence eventually speaks for you in a voice no noise can drown. The quiet work, the unseen effort, the patience that never gets applause. That's where real power grows. The goal was never to vanish from the world, but to vanish from dependence on it. That's the secret Machiavelli, the Stoics, and every wise mind shared. The path to influence begins with invisibility. The less you need to be seen, the more undeniable you become. So as we close this reflection, take a breath. Let the noise fall away. Ask yourself one honest question. If no one were watching, would you still pursue what you're doing now? Because if the answer is yes, if you'd still build, still learn, still grow, then you've already found the kind of wealth that can't be lost. If this journey spoke to you, leave a comment below with one word: freedom. Like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who's still chasing applause. Maybe it will help them remember that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is quietly disappear.